Well, hello from Twickenham ahead of a definitive game in this Six Nations Championship. We are here ahead of Ireland's captain's run. They should be out now in the next few minutes. So just give a rundown on the table before we get into this video. So Ireland are fifth going into this weekend. They are 1 point behind England and Italy in the table. Cian Tracey, you have been very, very optimistic about Ireland going into this game. 24 hours out, are you still the same?
I'm glad to be at a captain's run, Sinead, where it's not absolutely bucketing down, which is a positive before a ball has even been kicked tomorrow. I have been quite bullish. I think I would have been more bullish if Ireland had delivered a more complete performance last weekend against Italy. I know we'll get on and talk about the team, the ins and outs of it. I'm not convinced the bench in particular is the best bench that Andy Farrell had at his disposal. I'm very surprised he hasn't gone with a 6-2, particularly with the likes of Edwin Adogbo and Cormac Izuchuku in terms of what they brought against Italy last week. So I'm feeling less bullish, but it's great to be back in this stadium, isn't it? It is just like, it is one of the most iconic stadiums, rugby stadiums in the world, and a real privilege to be here. And I don't know, bullish, optimistic, quietly, cautiously optimistic maybe, because this is a place where Irish teams have suffered so much heartache over the years, as we all well know.
What way are you landing?
I've been kind of up and down about it all week, and then we've been doing our predictions for tomorrow's paper, which will be out, I'm sure, online later on today. And I had a look at everyone's, and I weighed it up, and I went with my gut, and I think it's going to be a difficult day. I think England are going to win this and win it well. I think they'll get on top of the scrum. I think they match up very well against Ireland from their point of view. I think they are the kind of team that Ireland really struggle with. They're powerful, dynamic and fast, crucially, and I don't see enough pace in this Irish team to live with what they can offer here at this stadium as they look to bounce back from a tough old day at Murrayfield. There are ways I can see Ireland getting into the game, and I do keep coming back to when I'm trying to grappling with it, because none of us have a clue what's going to happen really, but you're trying to make rational arguments. Like 2 years ago, Ireland were unbackable favourites coming here. No one, didn't Jamie Heaslip go on the BBC and say that there's no way England can win this game? Right. And England, like Ben Earl talked about it in the post-match, that he'd heard it, or they talked about it and they came out and they undermined loads of Ireland's strengths, produced a performance, and it wasn't all linear, but it was a real statement win for England. And there's nothing to say Ireland couldn't come out and with a really good tactical game plan, a load of lads who have been underperforming, who have been backed by their coach, come out with a big performance. That wouldn't surprise me necessarily, but if it's going on rational thought and kind of what I think and logic, I think the form line suggests it's going to be a hard old day for Ireland.
Make a case for Ireland, so.
I think a lot of it is going to come down to the scrum, and that is the big concern that I have tomorrow. I think you look back at the last two home games in particular, obviously everyone will remember South Africa in November, and I thought it was deeply concerning the job that the Italian scrum did on Ireland. I understand and I accept that the Italian scrum is vastly improved, but you wouldn't say it's one of the most fearsome in world rugby, and it was all sets of front rows that struggled. Obviously, Dan Sheehan and Tadhg Furlong. Now, I think Tadhg Furlong coming in from the start, might make a bit of a difference. Andrea Piardi is the referee here tomorrow. I think we were chatting about this with Joe and Eddie O'Sullivan on the podcast yesterday. I think if England were to win a scrum penalty at the very first scrum, that could possibly set the tone for what's to come. But on the flip side, we had similar concerns going to Paris, and the Irish scrum more than held its own. And I know Ireland are talking about being aggressive. Rudd has done a big piece tomorrow, having chatted to a couple of ex-props, and he can chat a bit about that maybe. But I know they're speaking about being more aggressive. But I think if Ireland were to get parity and hold their own, I think that would give them a massive opportunity to cause this English side problem, who we saw what Scotland did to them in terms of hurting them in the wide channels. I look at Henry Arundel, and I think, he's electric going forward with the ball, pace to burn, but I think he's a defensive weak link in this English backline now. To balance that out, I think Tommy Freeman going to the wing and Ollie Lawrence coming into midfield gives him a better balance. But the two tries in particular that Ireland scored last week, not Nick Timoney's, Jamie Osborne's, and Robert Balakoon's, showed that Ireland can still take teams through multi-phases. And if Jack Crowley is on his game, and he can get the likes of James Lowe, who was outstanding, as was Robert Balakoon, into the game, then I think Ireland have the weapons to hurt England just as Scotland did last weekend. So that's where my optimism comes, Sinead, but I think it all boils down to the scrum and what happens there.
Just two questions on that. Why do you think Andy Farrell largely stuck with the same front row? I know it's not all about the front row, and obviously Tadhg Furlong was brought in, but why did he stick with Lockman and Dan Sheehan there? And also, is the English scrum around the same as the Italian scrum, or is the Italian scrum better than the
I think
English scrum?
the Italian scrum is a coming force.
Yeah.
They caused South Africa a serious bother. I've been reading a little bit about it, and apparently there's a lot of Argentinian coaches within the Italian system who are working on these front rows coming up, and they've just developed them really well. And there seems to be a mindset. I saw Joe Hayes, the England prop, was talking about how their back five actually triggers a lot of the power that comes through. That they've built a kind of a quite unique system for them that's quite good. And then Ferrari, Dave Kilcoyne had a line in the piece that I have tomorrow. His name is Ferrari, but he never drives straight. And Mike Ross is another one I spoke to for that piece, and he was like, "Why are Ireland not trying to get away with stuff? It seems like you're able to go bore in on the hooker now. It seems to be refs are letting you away with it, but Ireland are trying to be squeaky clean and present these good pictures, and that's what they're talking about in terms of being more aggressive and taking a few more chances, because I'd rather you give away a penalty for going after a scrum than being the kind of submissive force at the scrum. So there's, Ross makes the point that, like, why is Dan Sheehan not popping opposition hookers? He's 118 kilos. I know he's a big man in terms of his height for a hooker, but he should be, like, the mindset of this Irish scrum tomorrow should be unbelievably aggressive. The hunters, not the hunted. Go after England, because you got to remember that there's a lot of familiarity within the front rows because of the lines. Like, both English hookers plus Ellis Genge went on that Lions tour, and they know Ireland know them. They would have done a lot of live scrummaging on that tour, so there's a lot of familiarity. Personnel wise, he was always going to bring Furlong back for this game if he was fit. Lockman is rated as the best scrummager, I think, of the loose heads. I think long term,
the fit loose heads.
The fit loose heads. Sorry, of course.
Yeah,
and like that's a massive, unspoken. I think everyone who's listening or watching, realises that Ireland are down Andrew Porter and the two Leinster looseheads who, like, were the next in line, but they were very unproven as well. Like, they're both quite new in their development, and even with the top looseheads involved, McCarthy and Porter in November, South Africa had a field day, and England might not be quite South Africa's level, but we saw Joe Hayes do a number on the Leinster scrum in Leicester. You were at that game. There is worry of, like, if you look at the rankings on the URC website, the 4 Irish provinces are down from 10th to 16th in the charts as the most successful scrums. Now, Leinster are quite aggressive in terms of seeking penalties in a way that Ireland aren't, and I think that's one of the reasons they come under a bit of pressure in terms of giving away their ball. But Irish scrummaging, I think, is at a bit of a low ebb at the moment, partly because of the retirement of Cian Healy, but also just maybe taking an eye off the ball in terms of that aggressive part of it. Other teams going for a bit more power through short spurts, Ireland trying to lock things out and just play off it. And hopefully last weekend, seeing Dan Sheehan get popped, seeing Tadhg Furlong given his wings, that will focus minds, and nothing focuses the minds like coming over here, the place where in 2012 and 2022 Ireland had really difficult scrum days.
I'm sorry I jinxed us, by the way, for the rain. But wasn't it in 2022 when Ireland were here and Reynal, I think Matthew Reynal was the ref, and afterwards they got a few apologies in terms of, a couple of penalties maybe shouldn't have went their way, and Ireland vowed that day to the onus is on them to adapt to whatever the referee is seeing, and that's why I mentioned Andrea Piardi for tomorrow in terms of that first scrum, because whatever picture he thinks he's seeing, it's up to Ireland to adapt to it rather than conceding 4 or 5 scrum penalties, because I think if that happens here in a place like Twickenham, an already difficult task will become even more so.
And Pierre Brousset is on the line, and he has been in charge of some of the more difficult days for Leinster in particular at the scrum. I remember that Bristol game last year, which was a absolute bore fest because it was just scrum after scrum after scrum, but they didn't get much change out of them, so that's something they need to be aware of as well.
Yeah, so 5 changes. Andy Farrell has named. You were out at the press conference yesterday, Rory. So looking obviously at Jack Crowley, no Sam Prendergast in the team, in the match day squad. What are you looking for exactly from Crowley tomorrow? I mean, he hasn't started a Six Nations game since Rome last year. Hasn't started for Ireland since Japan in mid-November. He did play here obviously 2 years ago, except with that Marcus Smith late drop goal actually that got them the win. So what are you looking for specifically?
Consistency. I think consistent good actions backing up good moments. So when he does one good thing, he's got to follow up with another. His kicking game needs to be improved. He needs to kick his goals, which he has done for Ireland in this window, but he wasn't necessarily doing it for Munster. He's got to fit the system. He's got to obviously play to his instincts and take it on when it's on, but like that Cast game stands out when he carried the ball into contact 19 times. I think with Munster he feels like he's got to do it all himself, whereas he knows when Ireland we saw him facilitate in the build-up to the Balakoon try. I think he's been very good off the bench for Ireland, and he hasn't started an awful lot of games, but it's a while since he had a really good game from the start for Ireland. That New Zealand game didn't go well. The Japan game wasn't brilliant. the New Zealand game last year, Italy last year was a disaster. Now again, like the other players are not playing well, the platform's not necessarily great. He's a quality player. He's 26 years old. Prendergast's been dropped entirely, and they can couch it whatever way they want about wanting to have minutes and legs and stuff like that. They just want one guy to come along and take ownership of this. This is his chance. If he can do it here, up against this English team, if he can drive Ireland to a performance and keep Crowley playing fullback, go 80 minutes, drive a performance, it's his jersey. And like, there's no preordained plan to take it off him again. They just want someone to take this now. I think at this stage of the World Cup cycle, it's a huge opportunity. But for Munster, we've seen great days like the Croke Park day. We've also seen some difficult days. We've seen him go off script. We've seen him make mistakes within games, make bad decisions, compound errors, be ill-disciplined. Say the Leinster game, the last 10 minutes, he lost his mind that day. He got done for dissent in the Cast game as well. Like, he's got to stay on point, stay on focus. It's such an opportunity. He's just got to nail it.
And we know that this place, Keane, can haunt even the most experienced about halves. I saw Johnny Sexton out here. I remember that game in 2020, just before COVID. Johnny Sexton, so experienced, had a nightmare that day.
Yeah, it's a feast or a famine, but my glass would be half full in terms of the opportunity that this presents itself tomorrow, because, and I do think I go back to the scrum and the pack more generally. Maybe we'll talk about the back five of the Irish pack that Andy Farrell has picked, but if the pack aren't on top and they're losing the aerial battle, they're losing the scraps on the ground, then it really doesn't matter who's playing 10, because any 10 is going to struggle to bring control. But I think I agree with what Rudd said. This is a huge opportunity for Jack Crowley to knit all the good things together that he's done. Like, think back, like you said, of the game in Croke Park. Like, that felt like a real statement. It was a statement performance from Jack Crowley up against Sam Prendergast, and he wasn't quite able to back it up when he went to Chicago Soldier Field in the New Zealand game. Obviously played Japan game as well, and then Sam Prendergast came in, so he has an opportunity now to make another big statement. But it's about consistency, both I think within the game and what's to follow as well.
So what about the pack? I thought Eddie O'Sullivan had an interesting line in your podcast with Joe last night, where he mentioned about Andy Farrell going back to the comfort zone. Obviously Josh van der Fleer. What do you make of the makeup? I was that, and I was quite surprised with the makeup of the bench as well.
Yeah, I think, if we pick at Josh van der Fleer, he's obviously looking for the exact same response that he got from James Lowe last weekend. I know a lot of people think, and I think Eddie touched on it, that Josh van der Fleer was probably rested last week, but correct me if I'm wrong, Rod, but Andy Farrell was very firm the previous week in saying no one was rested here, like that this is off the back of what happened in Paris. Josh van der Fleer didn't have his best game in Paris, but now he gets an opportunity to prove his point. Ironically, I know you're big on Caelan Doris playing 7, and I can completely understand why. I thought he played very well at 7 last weekend, so coming into this game I was fully expecting Doris to be 7 and Jack Conan to be 8. I did think Tyg Byrne would come back in at 6, as well as Cormac Izuchukwu did last week, but I certainly expected Izuchukwu to be on the bench. I think Nick Timoney is another guy. You talk about the open side. I mean, he's almost become a hostage to fortune in that he's been so good off the bench in both of the opening 2 rounds that Andy Farrell maybe sees him as a bench impact player, but he's very unlucky not to get a start as well. So I'm surprised that Izuchukwu isn't in the 23, and I'm surprised that Adogbo is as well. Look, I know obviously it was only his debut last week, and Andy Farrell talked about the challenge of coming to Twickenham, but at this stage of a World Cup cycle, and not that I want to frame everything within a World Cup cycle, but I would have liked to have seen the young guys, particularly because they played so well last week. I'd have liked to have seen them thrown in the deep end, because again, if they were off the bench, you're only looking for them to come on, injury aside, possibly for 20 minutes. So I'm a little disappointed, and I hope it doesn't come back to bite Ireland, because I don't understand the logic of the 5-3, particularly having Tommy O'Brien as number 23, because Tommy O'Brien is an out-and-out right winger. I know he has played bits and pieces in his underage days in the centre, but it doesn't give you a huge amount of flexibility. I know Frawley can play 10, 12 and full-back, but I'm still trying to figure out what Farrell is seeing in Tommy O'Brien being number 3. Possibly now he comes on and scores the winning try and he's hailed a genius, but I would rather have seen a 6-2 in the bench. Yeah,
but has it anything to do with Gary Ringrose' injury?
Possibly. Yeah. There may be someone else out there that is carrying something into the weekend that they're worried about. Yeah. So it's an unusual balance. Like, if you go back through Andy Farrell's team selections, he largely picks a centre on the bench. So or go 6-2, and 6-2 seemed to be the way they were going for this window. We saw it backfire for England last week, so maybe they got spooked.
Yeah, just looking there, I mean, Robert Balakoon's leg is strapped very heavily. Now, it was last weekend as well, and I'm absolutely not saying that that's the reason why Tommy O'Brien's on the bench, but his leg,
we're speculating, but
his leg is very heavily strapped. Obviously Ringrose took a big bang last week, and maybe that is the logic, but I don't know, would you prefer to see a 6-2? I certainly would for
Yeah,
tomorrow.
I think for this fixture, I agree with you. I thought the team did well enough. I know last week was a tough game, but it was a tough game partly because Italy played really well. I would have stuck with Izuchukwu. I would have kept out on a Dogbo on the bench. I would have leaned into the fact that this is not, you're here to win, but you're also here to develop and develop the team. And to be honest, like, a lot of the players who were picked today have not got the form to be like Josh Van der Veer is not having a great
I like
season.
how your voice went
I
down
know,
there,
yeah.
just in case I
Well, like, I think Nick Timoney should be starting. I think he deserves. If you're going to be changing your back row around, I think Conan's a big loss to that starting team. Now, he gives you great impact off the bench, but he's been such a leader for this team in recent weeks. He's been so commanding. I would have stuck with either stuck with Doris, or I would have brought Timoney in, because I think he's an excellent form. I don't understand why Mike Milne isn't in this 23.
That is baffling,
Never mind the
yeah.
starting team. Like, if you're just going on form, whatever's happening behind the scenes, I think he's been really hard done by. And I think, like, I mean, this is a classic Andy Farrell selection. He always goes back to his guys, and his guys are his guys, and he trusts that they will play their way into form, and we know they are class players. They're
Kind
getting
of hearing that a lot recently, though, like hoping to get something out of these guys,
yeah,
aren't we?
yeah, and he's pushing a lot of buttons and different things. And Josh Van der Veer owes him a performance, because he probably hasn't earned this start tomorrow. And I think Dan Sheehan owes him a performance, because he could easily have gone for Ronan Keller, who was excellent off the bench last week and is renowned as being the better scrummager. And I think Ty Byrne owes him a performance, because he was good off the bench last week, but I'm not sure he was good enough to take the jersey back off Izuchukwu, who, like, it's mysterious to me why he misses out in the 23. So, like, we framed this, or Farrell has kind of framed the Six Nations, or certainly last week, about investing in players. And then here we are again with the same team. You know, they're Lions, most of them are Lions. You know, it's an experienced core coming back in, and if they deliver a win in Twickenham, those, 13 in history, maybe 14, they can't be sniffed at. So that'll be an unbelievable moment, and it could be the catalyst. But if it's another difficult day like Paris, and he's gone for the same characters again, it's going to be really hard to justify, and I think it's going to be really hard to do it again as we go on. Just one thing to note, we knew that Sam Prendergast wasn't travelling. Harry Byrne is here, Michael Milne's here as well, so I wonder, is that preparing the ground for Harry Byrne being involved against Wales? Just a little kind of subplot in this ongoing number 10 saga.
It makes sense. So sum up the game before we get kicked out, Cian, that you imagine we'll see tomorrow.
England, we know what England are going to bring. They're going to bring a kick-heavy approach. I think the fact that Freeman has gone back to the wing excuse me, makes them even a bigger threat. I think they've picked 3-7s in their back row in Tom Curry, Ben Earl and Henry Pollock, who, it's amazing, it's his first start. I was writing about this earlier in the week. I actually had to double check that it was his first start for England. It just seems like he's been in our lives for so often, but what a player he is. So the fact they've picked 3-7, Sinead, would suggest to me that obviously they're going to have their aerial game, but they've picked 3-7s to win the battle on the ground as well. And I wonder if that played into Andy Farrell's selection, because obviously Ty Byrne is a breakdown specialist in terms of his jackal threat. Josh Van der Veer is excellent at the breakdown, and so is Caelan Doris. So I think it's a bit of, even though it's probably a bigger, possibly slower Irish back row, they need to match up to the pace and the dynamism of that English back row, and I'm fascinated to see how that battle goes. But I thought Ireland did really well in the air last week. I thought Jamie Osborne, James Lowe and Robert Balakoon, it was massively improved on what we saw in Paris. So I think if they can match them in the air, match them at the scrum, I do think they have the weapons. Stuart McCloskey playing, the best rugby of his career. Jack Crowley, like we said, with a big point to prove if he delivers a big game. I think they have the weapons capable of causing an upset, but a lot of things will have to go right.
Okay, look into the future.
My prediction? I think England will win, and they'll pull away. I think they, as I said earlier, just between their scrum, their ability to win the territorial battle through their aerial game, and then their speed and that power of Ollie Lawrence. I think he's the kind of midfielder Irish players often struggle to handle. I can see it being a difficult day at the office. How about you?
Oh, England win. Did you go?
I went to Ireland. I think 24-22. I went to Ireland. I think it's 11 points. England are favourites.
Yeah.
If Ireland were to lose by 11 points or more, I'd be very, very disappointed. So I'm going for a narrow 2-point win. Okay,
we will see. Cian and Rory, thank you very much for that. Follow all the build-up, of course, as usual, with the Irish Independent.